onboarding and development. We call it a lot of different things, but onboarding, it's when somebody comes on board. In other words, we hire them and they have their first week of work, their first month of work, their first 6 months of work, and their first year of work. A lot of that really is critical time. If you look on the data when it comes down to employees, you want to pay attention to a simple fact that when somebody comes on board, you need to make certain they learn the ropes. And learning and development, you want them to perform better and perform very well. There's a couple of reasons. Number one, having somebody come in for a month or two and then leave really uproots everything, and people question who and what they are and what you're doing because of the fact you had this person could drift in, this person drift out, or having somebody come in and not feel welcome, like they don't fit, and then not be able to rectify that because of the fact there's not much communication. Probably of all the things that I'm warning you in the aspect of a future leader, a future manager, one of the most critical aspects of a new employee is called orientation. Orientation. When they first walk in the door, it is not HR's responsibility to do orientation. A lot of people slough that off. HR's job is to make sure they fill out all the proper forms. They get trained on this and trained on that, trained on this. But the supervisor of that employee, that is the person that needs to be primarily responsible for the orientation. And if they're not doing it, they need to sit down there and figure out what they're doing, and maybe they're in the wrong profession. And that's how strong I feel about the aspect. The orientation needs to be coordinated by human resources, but that first week on the job, the supervisor should be checking in every single day, all 5 days, as to how that employee is doing. If you fail to do that, you want to answer the questions nonstop. Snap, snap, snap. Make certain that that new employee is launched into the organization in a positive way. There should be an agenda for that first week. Do that for the first week, and then literally every week have a meeting with that employee to make certain that for the first 2 months that everything is flowing well, they can answer questions. Try to get a mentor assigned to them. You want to get somebody who's going to take them around, show them all the little things. I mean, seriously, like, where is the restroom? What does this group do? Show them around your facilities. Show them as to who's doing what and why they're doing it. Pay attention to the needs of this brand new employee. Make them feel welcome, because it costs you money. The average cost when somebody leaves, the data's out there, and it shows that the average cost to replace an employee and then orientate somebody else is about 6 months of wages. Pay attention, make certain that you're building and developing this new person that you have, make them feel comfortable, make them feel welcome, make certain that their job they're doing is exactly what you're expecting them to do. And if it's not, you correct them when you first find a mistake. Don't cut them slack in the aspect, well, they're just kind of new. No, they're anxious. They want to do a good job. Don't underestimate who they are and their goal in trying to sit down and do the job well. You want them to do it well, and that's why you sit down there and spend a lot of positive time with them. And yes, it'll cut into your own time as a manager. It's going to be worth a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of energy later. So on a positive experience, it helps increase the commitment, job satisfaction. The customers are satisfied because they're excited, they're geeked. This is something brand new. A negative one, I don't know my job very well. They're going to be getting around to telling you that, they say someday, not so far. Okay, the customers, they get this kind of negative feedback on top of it. And then you have the turnover aspect. Pay attention to the aspect of you need to be doing this when you go through the development process. Once they're in, give them all the tests that you think, including personality tests, to make certain they know their personality and how it fits with the group that they're working with. If they got a team of 6, I have to tell you, I took the Strong's Interest Inventory when I first started doing that. Now I'm actually a trainer for it. But when I first took it, I found out so much about myself. I forgot about everybody around me. Then a second year, we did it again. And then I could pay attention to the people around me and how my strengths interacted with their strengths. It was a great experience. Now, that being said, you're talking to somebody here who has a massive amount of experience and training, and I'm telling you that make certain that your assessment, that you have a reason for all the different training that you do, but keep those employees in really good shape. FedEx. FedEx, you would think that a job at FedEx, and if you've been in a Fed warehouse, I've been there a couple times, and on the inside, they have people driving forklifts on loading docks. They have trucks all lined up. Everybody is hustling. FedEx, they have about a 4% employee turnover rate. Now, we're not dealing with jobs that have really a lot of intellectual challenges. You deal with people that do hard labor, hard work, but they're challenged. The reason FedEx has such a high employee satisfaction rate and little turnover is they train them. They have a lot of staff development. Staff development is critical. It is the lifeblood to keep your employees on cutting edge, and FedEx does an extraordinarily good job with their employees. Assessment, make sure you know what the objectives are of the assessment, the selection, the implementation, the evaluation. Make certain that you're checking to see that your employees have a really good aspect as to how they're training. Also, performance management. To some extent, the form is human resources. The people that do it are the supervisors. Are they worthwhile? Yes, we'll talk about that in just a second in the aspect of you want to define the performance, monitor and evaluate it, review the performance, provide consequences in the process. Sometimes you sit down to improve profitability, but you're seeing a lot of different methodologies, how you're doing performance evaluations. When it comes down to should you do them or not, I don't see that there's any risk in doing them. I do see a lot of risk in not doing them. You have a legal issue. If you have performance management issues, then that's the time to address them on a regular evaluation basis. Don't do it just for one person. Have a rhythm, have feedback. A lot of supervisors do not want to do performance evaluations, and a lot of employees don't like them. But younger generations, the data shows that they prefer to have performance evaluations on a regular basis. Oh, and by the way, when I do give me more money. That is actually a pretty common mantra. But the reality of performance management is you have a system. Normally what you do is on a performance evaluation, you take the top 10 duties of a job, and that's what you create your evaluation on, and then put some type of scale or rating as to what those are in there. Sometimes if you do management by objective, MBO, you might actually have those top 10 plus 2, 3, or even 4 different objectives that the manager and the employee agree upon, and that's why we call it MBO, or management by objectives. You have those 4 be the main things you're going to focus on for the next year, and then the 10 other areas on it, you do performance management. Either way, they always really consist of a tense conversation, and both parties normally are unsatisfied, but what's been found is that if you do them on a regular basis, then it's not stressful. There's a frequent feedback is always the best, and the feedback should be future oriented. If you're evaluating them for a whole year, 12 months, do not cheat that employee and evaluate them over a mistake they made in the last 30 days. Your job is to be honest, give a full year assessment. Ideally, you have more feedback than just that. You want to have objective appraisals, look on some data metrics if you can do them. If you have data metrics and you're consistent in using them across the board, then if you have a challenge on a performance evaluation or a termination based upon that, if somebody challenges you in court, if you can show that out of 20 people, you performed 20 evaluations every year for the last 5 years, all of a sudden you look really good and you made a really objective review. Subjective ones, trade appraisals, behavior appraisals, those are interesting, but be as objective as you possibly can. One of the latest rages that's been around for about 15 years now is called the 360-degree assessment. You actually have a large number of people assess the employee and their interaction. I was asked to create one of these, and so my president says, I want you to do one of these 360 things. And I kind of rolled my eyes because of the fact the reality is if you do that, everybody's involved and it bogs down the whole organization. So the very first pass we did is we created 25 different people would evaluate each employee. So the employee would submit 25 names, and then the supervisor of that employee would then scratch 5 people off of that, and they have 20 people to evaluate each individual employee. Well, all of a sudden now I had one dean, for instance. He was stuck. He was involved on 14 different committees. Well, we did our evaluations in May, just before finals, and so that dean had to spend about 20 to 30 minutes on each one of those 14 people. It really was time sucking in the aspect of taking time away from them on important duties at an important time. they can be really effective because incredibly, about 6 months before the appraisals come out, everybody's nice to each other because they have no idea on the committee who's going to sit down and be on their committee. So by the time you're all that, sometimes you use forced ranking where you have to sit down and put this person 1 and this person 2 and this person 3. That's another way to do it. Some companies do that and they terminate the bottom 4%, which is always interesting. You actually put yourself in a situation where you're going to fire a number of people no matter what happens. That is not my idea of trying to develop employees, but some people take that approach. Most managers inflate sometimes their employees' performance rating. We call that the B scale, where everybody gets a 4. On a 5-point scale, everybody gets a 4. Okay, you don't give the bad employees a 3 or a 2, they all get a 4. You don't give the good employees a 5 or a 5 plus, you give them a 4. And that way everybody's nice and everybody's nice to each other. Sometimes that really works really poorly. One time I had somebody, they were submitting evaluations on a really bad employee. The employee on a 5-point scale, they got a 2. And then they started getting these letters in this last year in their personnel file. And this employee was getting compliments for doing their job. Nothing extraordinarily, but the supervisor was copying them. The second letter I have, I called in the supervisor. I says, what are you doing? This employee is not stellar and you're saying they are. They're doing the work. Here's a job description. What are you doing? Well, I'm trying to sit down and incentivize them to do a good job. They did a third letter in their file. And then a month later, after the third positive letter that year, that supervisor wanted to fire them. I said, okay, come here. Here's the file. Here's the evaluation 3 years ago, the evaluation 1 year ago, and then here's your 3 letters, and now you want to fire them. I said, now you have to overcome the 3 positive letters you put into their file. Why did you do that? That was not good judgment. Do not praise people for doing their regular work. Praise them when they do something exceptional. And so by the time it was all done, we had ended up with a termination, and we came close to a lawsuit because the supervisor did not follow the instructions, did not follow the common sense rule, but was praising somebody that was a mediocre employee for doing just menial work that wasn't even close to being exemplary. Orientation, evaluation, develop the employee, make them really phenomenal, and that way you can be proud of their work and they can be proud of theirs and the place that they work. The 360-degree ratings is very popular right now. Expect to have one. It just depends on who you are, and the reality of it comes down to hopefully you won't have 20 people evaluating you, but it's pretty common to have 3 to 7 people evaluating people for the 360s. Onboarding and development, a critical part of every organization. Take care.